do become aware of the fact that you are, to a great extent, you've allowed yourself to become the product of your thoughts. And where did you get those thoughts from, you think? Were you born with them? How many of the thoughts you have about yourself and about life every day were you born with? Remember when you were smiling, looking up at mommy and daddy, 1 year old? How many of the thoughts you're having today did you have that day? Probably none. Who were you then? Maybe that's more you than who you are today. At least in your own thinking of yourself. In truth, you're always yourself. But in your own perception of you, you've tolerated yourself to generate an image of yourself that's based on other people's perspectives, everything you've learned over the years. That's not the true self. That's not what you are. It's not having a true relationship to yourself. To regard to yourself as the thoughts that are fired off in the brain, which will just become deeper and deeper and deeper grooves as you grow older. If you're not paying attention. If you're not making an effort to awaken more and to reroute some of those thoughts, and or let go of thoughts altogether and rest more and more in the presence that is now noticing my speech. The first elevation is great. Focus on that. Don't be too focused on the absolute unless you've practiced being present to presence for a long time, or you just feel really strong resonance towards this. I just want to give you the context so you know the journey. And here's the beautiful thing. Once you know about the absolute, practicing being aware of awareness becomes easier. It becomes more enjoyable because you understand it from a different context. So let's say you avoid that slippery slope and you maintain a great degree of consciousness, conscious awareness, and free will. Free will, again, means that you have the ability to notice your thoughts and deny your thoughts. But mostly what people do, instead of deny their own thoughts, they deny other people or other things or things that are happening because they have already believed in the thought about these other people or the thought about these other things. So you think you're dealing with reality out there when you're accepting or rejecting or liking or not liking, when in truth you've already missed the first step. You've not noticed that you're having thoughts about the world. You can deny or accept that thought about the world. You think you're thinking about the world, but one step before that, there's a thought that arises about the world. This thought appears to you. You think the world's appearing to you. That's already an assumption. Actually, the thought about the world appears to you. You see that? The perception of the world appears to you. You believe the world appears to you. But actually, what appears to you first is the idea of the world. Only then do you begin to experience the world. I know this for a fact, and you can test it out. It's very simple. You've never experienced the world other than thinking about it. You just never have. It sounds so weird when you first hear this. It sounds so unrealistic. But the deeper you go down the rabbit hole, the more blissful you become, the more awake you become. And as a result, things just start to change. Your perception of the world starts to change. And you realize that if I'm really honest with myself, I've never actually experienced the world. I have to make something up. I don't even know what that means. I have to assume 100 million things and then believe those 100 million assumptions in order for me to truthfully be able to say, I experienced a world, ever, at any point in my life. You've only ever experienced your thoughts about the world. No one's ever found the world that they're thinking about. What you're describing is just the interpretation of the brain of vibrations which you call sense organs. So there's stimulations, the brain creates a holographic sense and image and feeling and taste and all that. And then you think about it. So you have a reflection. It's the painter's painting. Imagine the painter believing that what it's painting actually exists apart from the painter's mind and the painter's artwork. That's what we do. We assume that what we look at is real. Then we miss this great opportunity to accept or deny or alter what's initially presented to us to begin with, which is our perception of the world, which is all we know. You've never experienced the world outside of your perception of the world. True or not? Give me one memory of the world that you did not perceive. Scary proposition to some minds, depending on how you think and what you derive your sense of well-being and safety from. If it's the sense that the world is real and solid, and you can always go back to the same street where you grew up and all that stuff, if that's your sense of self, that's what it's based on, then I love you very much, and I feel for you. But then this will be a scary proposition. You mean the street I grew up in? It's not real, it just is perception? Sounds horrible because you've given so much of your happiness away to the painting. You've forgotten the stability and the power in being the painter, and beyond that, the infinite absolute.